You're watching Shalom TV, celebrating Jewish culture. Funding for Shalom TV has been provided by the following. And by viewers like you.
Where were you on Sunday, May 1st, when you heard that American forces had killed Osama Bin Laden? That's a question people today will answer for the rest of their lives, just as we could answer where we were on 9/11, when Islamic extremists murdered more than 3,000 Americans at the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. By now, I'm sure you've heard many accounts of the extraordinary bravery and competence of the 40 Navy SEALs who executed their mission flawlessly, without an American casualty, while limiting those killed in the action to just 3 individuals in addition to Bin Laden. And the success of the Navy SEAL operation is reminiscent of Israel's daring and successful raid on Entebbe on July 4th, 1976, and evokes the same levels of awe and appreciation as the entire world felt for the IDF on that occasion. And one can only imagine the sense of emotional relief which families who lost loved ones on 9/11 now must feel. Or to use President Obama's phrase, there's a sense of justice being done to find the mastermind of a series of deadly attacks on American citizens, culminating on American soil on 9/11. Symbolically, we all understand what Bin Laden's death means for this country, and why we as Americans applaud the Navy SEALs, American intelligence, and President Barack Obama. The question now is, what does Bin Laden's death really mean in the ongoing war against Islamic extremism? How has Al-Qaeda really been affected? What can Americans realistically expect going forward? And then as Jews, we're concerned with what the event might mean for the state of Israel and the Jewish people. Well, for some insight into the ramifications of the death of Osama Bin Laden, I'm extremely pleased to welcome back on our phones right now one of the world's foremost analysts on both terrorism and Islamic extremism, Daniel Pipes, the founder and director of the Middle East Forum and the author of 12 books on these subjects. And Daniel, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you, Rabbi. Glad to join you today.
So, Daniel, how significant is Americans' killing of Osama bin Laden?
It's very significant as a symbolic and psychological act. It is significant in terms of taking out the leader of Al-Qaeda, one who is probably irreplaceable in terms of communication and forming alliances. It's also turning out to be very important in U.S.-Pakistani relations.
We'll come to that in one moment. Daniel, in effect, was bin Laden an active leader these days of Al-Qaeda?
Active in the sense of communications and strategy, but not the person, from what I understand, who was actually running the show. That's Zawahiri, his number 2, presumably now number 1.
So is it as significant as the American media is suggesting?
No, it's not. Operationally speaking, it's not significant. Most terrorists are not connected to Al-Qaeda. The Islamist threat overall is thousands of times larger than Al-Qaeda. So from that point of view, it is a minor event. But from the point of view of a victory for our side and defeat for theirs. There was partying in New York Times Square. There was no partying in Kandahar.
Daniel, how do you feel about his being buried at sea?
I think that was an intelligent move.
Tell me why.
More basically, I think it was the right thing to do to kill him rather than to capture him. The last thing we needed was a protracted, years or perhaps decades-long legal process.
You have written an article already that's appeared online about your concern for what this does mean in terms of American-Pakistani relations. Talk to me about that for a moment.
Well, U.S.-Pakistani relations have been dicey for a long time, and the fundamental problem is that we have extremely few friends in the country, and yet we want a lot from it. And the fact that Barack Obama got on national television with his largest audience ever and outright lied and said that we had the cooperation of the Pakistani authorities when we didn't is in itself hugely problematic. And then the fact that American forces did this without any authorization is having major repercussions in Pakistan. And then the fact that the Pakistanis are so hostile is having repercussions here. We gave $4.5 billion last year of American taxpayer money to Pakistan. Huge amount, dwarfs what we give Israel, for example. That is very much in jeopardy now. So who knows where this is going to go, but certainly there are very bad feelings between the American and Pakistani publics and between the governments.
The suggestion is that even if it were less than honest, the statement about Pakistan helping the United States was an attempt by the administration to protect the U.S.-Pakistani relationship. Do you see any merit in it from that perspective?
No, because either way it comes out badly. If the Zardari government in Pakistan endorsed this operation, then it's in big trouble with its population. And if the operation happened without Pakistani government support, then the government there is seen as incompetent. So, no, it doesn't work either way. But I think the truth generally is a good thing to do is tell the truth, especially when you have an audience of this sort. Because not telling the truth on this one issue, very important issue, puts in doubt the entire American government presentation. If this isn't true, then what else might not be true? And then the conspiracy theories start to flourish.
By the way, in your own mind, Daniel, there's no question that U.S. Navy SEALs killed Osama Bin Laden.
No, there's no question in my mind, in part because if they hadn't, we'll be having a video one of these days of Bin Laden sitting there with today's newspaper saying, I'm alive. This is all a fraud. I don't think U.S. government can.
Now, does it bother you that the United States did, in fact, go into Pakistan, violated their territorial laws by going into their country to effect this operation?
Clearly, it's not the sort of thing one wants to do, but I think in this situation, it is justified. More broadly, my approach to a state like Pakistan would be to say, you make trouble for us, we will do what we have to do. You cooperate with us, we'll help you. And here, it appears, circumstantially, it certainly appears that the Pakistani government, or some bureau of the Pakistani government, was sponsoring Bin Laden. And this is just totally unacceptable, that a mass murder of Americans would be sponsored by a government. That's an act of war. So therefore we engage in an act of war, and I think that was legitimate.
To what extent do you feel there has been world sympathy with this American action?
I don't think there's that much. Yes, in Western countries one does certainly find a hardcore sympathy, but in particular as time goes on, it is a bit reminiscent of 9/11, where the initial impulse was sympathetic to the United States, but then as people think about it, dwell on it, think through the implications, become conspiratorial, one finds that sympathy erodes. And by the way, it's very interesting to note, whereas Americans were out partying and generally have been feeling very good, Europeans have been full of qualms. Survey research shows, the press shows, politicians are showing that there's a lot of doubt about this. I think the worst example that I've come across is the title of an article in a communist German newspaper, which is an unbelievable title. The terrorists killed Bin Laden. That's an extreme statement, but it does give an indication of the difference between the Europeans and ourselves.
That's very interesting, Daniel. Is there any justification? Wouldn't one expect, especially Western Europe, to be very supportive of this action?
Well, they don't, in general, the Europeans don't believe in hard power. And they take offense at the United States and Israel using hard power precisely this way. The sort of things that you and I agree are necessary, reluctantly agree, but nonetheless agree are necessary. They don't. If anything, they would say that he should have been captured alive and put through a legal process, given his rights.
And you, by the way, have already said you're glad he was not.
Yes, I think it's justified in of itself, and that he's a mass murderer, and I think it's justified in political and legal terms.
You know, this is virtually the 50th anniversary of the Eichmann trial, and that was a very different model, where, in fact, Eichmann was put on trial. There was a long, lengthy trial, and it was used to, in essence, redocument the horrors of the Holocaust, and then he was executed, and his ashes were spread over the Mediterranean Sea. That
Right.
does not apply in your mind to what should have been done to Bin Laden.
I think the Ben Gurion government at that time self-consciously saw the Eichmann trial as a method with which to educate Israelis and the world about the Holocaust. It's worth pointing out that in the 1950s, there was general silence on this subject. There were no memorials, there were no books. This was something that was just too awful to contemplate. Mm-hmm. And so the Eichmann trial was didactic in purpose. I don't see any parallel here. We have talked a great deal about Bin Laden, and obviously Bin Laden is, by historical standards, a very minor criminal compared to Hitler and Eichmann. Reluctant to make the comparison, but if one does, we have thoroughly debated this subject. We don't need a didactic process.
What should Americans expect now? Do you personally worry that there will be an attack now on American soil?
Yes, I think that there is a greater likelihood of attacks on Americans or American interests, not necessarily on American soil, but somewhere in the world. If there is not, it would suggest that the sleeper cells and the various terrorists in the woodwork are not really that fearsome. Mm-hmm. That if they can't do it now, it suggests that their capabilities are lesser than we had thought.
So does this mean that we may, in fact, be winning the war against Islamic extremism?
No. They're really different things. One is the spectacular, large-scale, international terrorist incident or attack, assault, atrocity that Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda specialize in. And we have stopped them over the last decade here, when we've won a certain victory there. But that is only a small part. First of all, there are other forms of violence, lesser forms of violence, that don't require this degree of preparation and funding and international communications and large-scale planning. These are happening all the time. Small-scale Islamist terrorist incidents all the time. It's up to around 16,000, 17,000 deaths since 9/11. These are ongoing. Secondly, perhaps even more importantly, there's a whole Islamist effort that is unrelated to violence, criminality, and terrorism, but is working through the institutions, political, educational, media, legal, and creating an Islamist infrastructure.
Well, Daniel Pipes, it is wonderful to speak with you and to hear some of your analysis. It's interesting, Daniel, we had the chance to speak together in studio. Then we played your address at the convention in Miami when you appeared with David Saperstein, and now I get to speak with you. You're in California right now, so we may have to, in some way, put your name up whenever we bring the Shalom TV logo up. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate the fact that you give us time and share your perspective. I appreciate it very, very much. I look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Thank you, and thank you for the chance to talk on Shalom TV.
Be well. And those are the thoughts of Daniel Pipes, an expert on Islam and on terrorism, and he is the director of the Middle East Forum. I also hope you'll watch the 2 other programs that deal with the death of Osama Bin Laden, which are now airing on Shalom TV. One is with Barry Rubin, one of Israel's leading experts on Muslim affairs and on terrorism. And also watch our discussion with Micah Halpern and Stephen Boehm discussing the ramifications of the death of Osama bin Laden. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who can send a tax-deductible contribution of $36 or more to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media to help support our programming. Tax-deductible checks may be made out to GEM and mailed to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. Please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD, and we thank you for your kind support.